He says, "She never shows up," loud enough for teachers to hear. My son stares at his shoes. Then I notice the yellow badge printer on the counter. The pickup line does not move so much as it breathes in loops, a choreography of SUVs inching past orange cones that glint like small warnings, clipboards flashing in the hands of people who know the names of 500 children, and the exact cadence of which parents arrive early for optics, and which arrive on time because their lives are built on alarms instead of applause. And I am halfway down the block when I clock the players. Coach Mendez with his whistle tucked into his shirt, the assistant principal scanning the line like an air traffic controller, the office aide behind the glass, nursing the last inches of a LaCroix, while the little yellow badge printer blinks the way a lighthouse does for boats that claim they've never needed one. My son is 4 cars ahead, backpack straps crooked from the way he runs when he hears the bell, and I know before the sound reaches me that he has heard something that made his shoulders draw inward, because children are barometers. First the pressure drops, then the storm arrives. He stands there with his hands in his pockets and that chorus-ready voice he keeps for coaches and committees, and he says, "She never shows up for our kid," with a smile tilted toward the cluster of teachers who sign and count and keep. And it is the kind of sentence men throw like confetti when they believe the cleanup will always be done by women who know where the brooms are kept. And the first thing I feel is not anger, but an ache that starts low and lifts like a hand closing around my throat as my son's gaze slides to his shoes, because nothing teaches a child the shape of loyalty faster than watching an adult try to make it small. Around us, the car rider lane does what it always does. Parents wave like they are on floats in a parade of good intentions. A PTA mom laughs a little too loud at something no one said. The dad with the electric truck idles at precisely the posted mark because precision photographs as love. And from the open front doors, the day's last smell of pencil shavings and cafeteria soap drifts out like proof that learning leaves a trace. I think of all the tiny digs this year, the way he told the book fair committee I had a knack for cute displays while I was counting register tape to reconcile deposits, the way he joked at the fall festival that some moms work, some moms volunteer. Guess which does both? The open house quip about how I knew the office ladies by name, as if that were a deficit rather than the engine that makes the school run, and I cataloged them not to keep score, but to build the page that will live when the air clears. I practiced a drill I learned during fevers and field trips and mornings when the copier chewed a stack of permission slips, and it all had to be reset before the tardy bell. In for 4, hold 40. 4, out for 6, shoulders down and back like I'm about to walk onto a stage that pays in small faces rather than applause, left hand loosening on the steering wheel, right hand finding the visitor lanyard in the center console where it lives curled like a patient snake, and I feel the familiar weight in my palm. The hard plastic of last month's badge, still clipped because I never remember to remove it. The micro-embossed date proving that whatever else is said, I was here when the second grade reading corner needed to be assembled, and the STEM lab needed extra hands for balloon rockets that kept flying into ceiling tiles. I pull up to the cone where the aide with the neon vest points, roll down the window, and watch with the clear-eyed calm of someone who has learned to separate performance from policy. The office window blinks with that small green LED that means the system is live. The aide glances at the paper log out of habit, even though most of us badge in through the tablet now. And on the wall behind her, the analog clock holds steady at 2:57, which matters because in a building like this, time is not mood. It is governance, bells, passes, drills, the ledger of minutes that fund librarians and reading specialists and aftercare aides, whose names my son knows better than some relatives because they show up every single day, even when no one tells them they are saints. He looks at me when I park and does that thing where his eyebrows pretend this is normal, where he choreographs his own feelings so no adult will have to clean them up. And I can taste the word "not yet" as I open the door. Not yet a scene. Not yet a correction. Because the point in a school is never to teach someone a lesson at the expense of a child who did not enroll for this unit. The point is to build a record that will outlast the sentence delivered like a smirk, and records do not need microphones. They need printers and signatures, and the small ceremony of someone who knows where the paper lives. He's still talking, lighter now, turning the cut into banter that seeks witnesses, and a teacher who knows better than to take bait. Smiles with her eyes and says nothing, because the best educators keep the weather inside them as constant as the humming air. I walk past, place my palm lightly on my son's backpack so he knows I am here, not to defend with volume, but to anchor with presence. And then I lift my gaze to the office window and meet the aide's eyes, and there is the slightest tilt of her head toward the counter where the visitor badge printer waits with its roll of yellow stickers inside, the little rectangle that prints names and times and destinations no matter who insists something else is true. I step into the foyer where the carpet still carries wet footprints from third graders who watered the school garden and forgot to wipe their shoes. And the chill of institutional air wraps around me like a reminder that buildings like this are built to hold everyone's stories without choosing sides. The aide pushes the sliding window open with 2 fingers and says, "Hi, miss," in that warm professional tone that proves real kindness has a badge of its own, and I hold up my lanyard without being asked because muscle memory is also a kind of argument, and I say, "Could I check the log for my own visits?" As if I am asking for a tissue rather than a witness. Behind her, a low shelf holds binders turned outward like spines in a library, field trip releases, drill reports, volunteer clearances, and on the counter a highlighter the color of lemon custard sits uncapped beside the printer as if waiting for its cue. The aide's glance flicks to the dismissal clock pinned to the bell schedule, and then to the hallway where the attendance officer keeps her office door propped open with a box of folders labeled Q3 Audit. And the air shifts in that way it does when adults who are tired and good decide to choose the task that will take them 5 minutes now and save 5 people an hour tomorrow. I do not look back at him because scenes feed on eye contact. I look at my son instead and ask about the story he wrote today, the one with the dragon that knows the names of all the teachers, and he lights up just enough to remind me why I am standing here calmly and not turning into a person I would not let on campus unsupervised. The printer blinks again, a slow ready, 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 and in the glass reflection I see the attendance officer stand, reach for the reading glasses that hang from a chain like a tiny anchor, and smooth the front of her cardigan the way people do when they are about to do a small thing precisely. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. The attendance officer steps out, slips on her reading glasses, and asks, "Would you like me to print today's and this semester's check-ins?" He rehearses custody optics by telling me to stay invisible at drop-off. I label every classroom shift from memory anyway. 72 hours before the pickup line turned into a stage, our kitchen played its usual morning part, fridge humming like a muted metronome, the calendar magnets lined up in candy colors against stainless steel, snack duty cards clipped under a bulldog magnet shaped like a paw. He stood at the island with a mug he doesn't wash, scrolling through an email labeled Custody Narrative Draft, while I separated grapes into small containers and transferred the field trip slip from the drying rack to the backpack pocket, where signatures don't get wrinkled into apologies. "This week," he said, adopting the voice he uses when he thinks a judge is listening. "Let's keep you low profile at drop-off. Invisible plays better. Clean optics." He didn't look up. He didn't have to. He's practiced this line, the way other people practice names. I slid the snack calendar 2 inches left and murmured, "Thursday DIY trail mix, room 12. Because even if I vanished, raisins still required hands. The kitchen wall carries our year like rings in a tree, color blocks for early release days, star stickers when he remembered the library book, a blue dot for every STEM lab shift I covered when subs fell through. His narrative lives in the declaratives he floats at dinner. Mine lives in the ink that stains my thumbnail from writing dates on Ziplocs. He outlines custody optics. I stack facts. He weaponizes anecdotes. The rainy day he stepped in to pick up, the time he handled a late project, the one time he coached a recess soccer game because he happened to arrive early on a Tuesday. I keep the quiet ledger that makes classrooms run, the day I restocked the nurse's bandage drawer, the hour I laminated sight word cards until my shoulders clicked, the morning I learned which third graders need 2 passes at goodbyes before math stops feeling like a cliff. He says, "Stay invisible." My mind pulls a thread and labels a week without consulting me. Monday, 8:05. STEM lab. Look for the Robocar battery bin under the counter. Fix the frayed lead with heat shrink. 10:15. Art. Ms. Rivera's cart wobbles. Wedge the folded paper under wheel 2. Tuesday, 7:50. PTO Subcommittee. Grant Review. Line 3 needs the STEM hour totals. Remind them to attach the agenda to the minutes or the district kicks it back. 11:30. Library. Shelve the graphic novel Spine Out because the third graders will pretend they don't know the Dewey Decimals and then find them anyway. Wednesday, 9:20. Read aloud. Room 12 loves cadence. Room 11 wants voices. Thursday, snack duty. Friday, maker. Friday, hot glue is a tyrant. Unplug before it decides to burn a new rule into the table. If I am invisible, it's only because someone has to be the water the ship forgets it floats on. After he leaves, I pull the drawer where we keep pens that aren't allowed to migrate. Black ink for forms, blue for notes home, red for the copy of the court calendar I pretend not to memorize. I open my laptop and begin the kind of quiet prep that looks like scrolling until you notice the discipline of it. Raptor visitor logs. Download the last 6 months where my driver's license generated a badge. Export to CSV because spreadsheets behave when judges don't. Google Takeout, my personal calendar to .zip with STEMlab. Art cart. Read aloud and nurse run. In event titles, because when you name your work plainly, it refuses to shrink later. Screenshots of volunteer approvals, district emails with green checkmarks and timestamped clearances. I save each into a folder name for the semester and back it up to a thumb drive labeled with actual label maker tape because I don't let proof depend on cloud mood swings. While the coffee cools into the temperature of sense, my phone pings with an email from the office aide, the one who can balance the attendance counts in her head while giving a kindergartner a new shirt because someone's lunch turned into a science experiment. Confirming your STEM lab shift hours for the grant audit, she writes, attaching a sheet with columns that would romance my father. Date, start, end, badge number, supervisor initials. I scan it and feel a strange relief. The hours that turned into cardboard towers and shook tiny hands free from fear now stand, as digits that can feed a grant narrative and grease the hinge of next year's budget. These match my calendar, I reply, adding 2 makeup shifts, weather day coverage. She answers with a heart in text form I won't screenshot because we both know feelings aren't exhibits, numbers are. I pull up our school's volunteer portal, the one that still loads like a page from 2007 but holds gold behind its wrinkles. The district logs approvals with more ceremony than the honors assembly. Approval IDs, expiration dates, the name that lives on my license, not the one that fits better in small talk. I screenshot the confirmation page, the good through 2026, highlighted in the developer's idea of yellow. I print it because printers are the last honest witness in a world that applauds scrolls. Then I do something I didn't have the right to at 22 and earned by 38. I request my own record like I matter. Simple, adult, sovereign. If the story turns at pickup, I want my hands steady because paper, not pain, will be doing the talking. The day stretches itself into useful errands. I swing by the library and swap out 2 picture books for a stack the librarian slid aside, kids whose parents forgot the fine Get Grace-like air, and it doesn't come out of the budget if someone remembers to ask the friends group. I talk to the nurse about the dosing chart for spring pollen kids so the substitute can stop guessing by the size of a backpack. I drop a note for Ms. Rivera in the art room that the glue sticks are low. She writes back with a smiley face made of punctuation and the exact ordering code that keeps the supply closet from becoming a cave with a dragon hoarding expired markers. If someone studied my day from the ceiling, they might say I drifted. The log will say I held. Evening brings the living room stage where he workshopped his custody optics, and I watched the muscles in his jaw turn a story into a posture. Judges like clarity, he says, as if clarity were a thing you wear and not a thing you submit on letterhead. You flutter when you talk about school. Flutter. He says it with the tenderness of a predator naming a bird. Stay invisible, he repeats. Less confusion. Clean lines. I look at the calendar where our blue dots outnumber the magnets and think, why do men say lines when they mean leashes? I fold the laundry stacked like small hills and choose the compromise. That isn't surrender. I will not argue. I will align the record. Late, when the apartment moves into its night hum, I sit with my laptop glow and do the tiny clerical meditation that keeps me from turning into a siren no one can hear. I rename files with the same scheme the front office uses. Wipe, yem, miem, DD, event badge number. Because nothing calms a frantic future like a present that alphabetizes. I assemble a private index, Exhibit A, Raptor Visitor, CSV, Exhibit B, Google Calendar Export, Exhibit C, Volunteer Approval Screenshots, Exhibit D, Grant Audit Confirmation. I write a cover note to myself because men think cover notes are foreplay. Women use them as maps when hands are shaking. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. I'm not practicing silence to become small. I'm practicing it so the paper can be big enough to carry both of us without spilling. I'm not collecting proof to win applause. I'm building a bridge made of timestamps so that when a boy looks at his shoes in a pickup lane, the grown-ups in the building have more than a shrug to hand him. The next morning brings a small, decisive ping, the kind that turns a plan into a path. Subject line in district font, sender, attendance. Per policy, attendance summaries can be produced upon parent request, ID required. He signed the co-parent communication addendum, never noticed I added school record access parity and documentation preference. The night we initialed the co-parent addendum at our dining table, he skimmed for the parts that sounded like stage direction. No disparagement at school. Timely pickup notifications, medical updates within 24 hours, and missed the 2 small clauses I had written in the calm diction of grown-ups who file things. School record access parity, I typed, so that whatever portal or paper was offered to him would be offered to me without gatekeeping. Documentation preference, I added to bless the habit I already live by. When narratives collide, we privilege the document, badge logs, sign-out slips, rosters, emails, over anyone's volume. He signed with the flourish he uses on bar checks, kissed the air near my cheek, and told me we were so aligned. Alignment is not a feeling, it is a ledger. I slid the addendum into a sleeve and slept the sleep of a woman who knows which drawer holds the map. Plain English, because schools run better when adults stop pretending policy is a foreign language. FERPA first, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It gives me, as a parent, the right to inspect and review my child's education records, attendance, report cards, discipline entries, some health records housed by the school, within 45 days of a written request. Faster in practice when your building is staffed by saints with clipboards. FERPA also gives me the right to request an amendment if something is inaccurate, to consent before personally identifiable information is disclosed, with carved-out exceptions, and to receive the school's annual notice telling me how they do all this without losing their minds. Visitor management systems are not FERPA records. They're security logs, Raptor badges, sign-in timestamps, what door you used, why you entered. But those logs are business records the district can share with a parent under local policy, and in a custody quarrel, they function like the world's politest witnesses. I don't need the custodian to testify. I need the printer to behave. So I reconciled. I pulled my visitor check-ins for the semester, the sheet that lists date, time, badge number, destination, and sign-out. I laid beside it the classroom sign-out slips I keep in a pocket folder. The nurse sends them home when she can. The office aide prints one if I forget to grab it on the way out. The teacher initialed the one where I took 3 kids to the book fair and returned with 4 because a cousin was crying and needed the aisle with the shark bookmarks. I added a volunteer background clearance letter that lists my approval ID and expiration. It reads like a passport to the rooms where work happens. Then the crisis drill rosters. Every parent volunteer signs when a drill interrupts a shift. Those sheets carry times, locations, and the printed names of people who were there, doing whatever needed doing, while bells practiced being brave. On my living room rug, the pages looked like laundry. In my head, they snapped into columns until they resembled a spine. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. That sentence kept threading itself through my work like quilting. I marked every date he had tossed out as proof of my absence and matched it to a badge print that said I was there at 7:42, gloved up by 7:44, wiping paint water off a table by 7:46. The day he joked at open house that some moms work, I had checked in twice, Once at morning recess to cover the swings so the para could eat. Once at noon to unlock the STEM closet because the spare key was in the principal's car at a training 2 towns over. The day he told the PTA president, "She shows up when it's convenient," landed on the same square as my 3-hour lunch duty when the sub called out and the second graders taught me that apples can revolt. The Saturday he bragged at soccer about being primary parent. I was the one in the gym with the barcode scanner at the book fair, kneeling on tile to match ISBNs to wish lists, so a kid with shaky hands could buy the exact dragon he'd counted on for weeks. I built a grid on paper because paper keeps me from getting loud. Column 1, date. Column 2, his claim, quotation marks and all, with the time and place he said it so I'd remember the audience he auditioned for. Column 3, my check-in times pulled from the visitor CSV, badge numbers included. Column 4, role, STEM, art, library, lunch, recess, book fair, makeup duty, field trip chaperone, crisis drill, or floater. My favorite job because it means you hold whatever is falling. Column 5, corroboration, email from the office aide, text from the librarian, grant hour confirmation, principal's thank you sent at 6:12 a.m. to the 6 people who showed up to haul tables before the city woke. The grid didn't argue. It aligned. Every overlap was a small bell ringing. You do not get to rename work because you prefer a different narrator. He called to check in on the week. I let it go to voicemail because my tone prefers not to be cross-examined without X. A in hand. We should be honest about who shows up, he said, voice pitched for an audience I could not see. Honesty without records is theater. I sent the office a polite note. Per addendum and district policy, I'm requesting the semester-to-date visitor check-ins associated with my ID and the volunteer ledger entries that include my name. I can present ID and wait in the lobby if easier. 10 minutes later, the attendance window bleeped with a little light that always looks like dawn to me. The aide waved, slid the sign-in book aside with her forearm, and asked me to write the request on a half sheet so she could tuck it under the principal's rubber band that says, "To do today," because she knows I trust systems, and she trusts that I won't ask her to cut corners the way some parents do when they want a private show. While the principal signed, I did one more reconciliation pass that steadied me more than coffee. I pulled the district's FERPA notice from their website, the one with bullet points that make busy adults glaze, and I read the parts that belong to me out loud until the words became furniture. Right to inspect, right to request amendment, right to a hearing if the amendment is denied, right to file a complaint. None of these require a parent to be charming. They require a parent to be clear. I printed the page and paperclipped it behind my grid so that if anyone suggested my request was unusual, I could show them it was ordinary, boring even, the way breaks are boring until a hill reminds you they are holy. Discovery didn't arrive like fireworks. It arrived like a highlighter uncapped. His never shows up line overlapped with a Tuesday I wore an orange vest at the crosswalk in sleet because the crossing guards kid had the stomach flu. Another fell on the day I ran the last 2 hours of the book fair because the librarian's voice gave out and I know how to count cash drawers without praying to luck. The PTO president's spreadsheet, shared view only because she loves her boundaries, showed my initials beside lunch duty extra shift 3 times in a month. He later told a mediator I was too busy to see our son. The crisis drill roster listed my name and the time I led 12 third graders to a corner and counted heads twice while the principal rattled the doorknob to practice fear in a way that makes it shrink. Claim met date, volume met ink. Principal held, I won't argue, I will align the record. When your child's head drops under a sentence that tries to shrink you, the temptation is to narrate your life at a decibel that breaks the clock. The grown-up alternative is to make the clock your witness. He wields shame, I bring timestamps. He lifts a line for the pickup audience. I lift a ledger for the office that keeps the building standing. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. The folder weighed almost nothing. The paper inside weighed everything. At the counter, the attendance officer stepped out from behind the glass, slipped on her reading glasses the way my grandmother used to before telling a story that mattered, and looked at my written request like it was exactly the right size. We can produce semester-to-date check-ins and the volunteer ledger, she said, tapping the printer that purrs like a cat when numbers are about to become evidence. Then she smiled with the conspiratorial kindness of a woman who prefers neat columns to messy gossip. Want color highlights by roll? My first ally isn't a friend. It's the attendance officer who respects timestamps more than charisma. The first yes I got didn't come with a hug. It came with a nod from behind glass, the kind that says, I see your request, I see your ID, and I see that this building runs on clocks, not applause. His little eyes dropped, and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. I carried that ache to the counter like a document and handed it to the only person in the room who would treat it like one, the attendance officer, who touched the printer as if it were a witness and said, Let's pull your range. She wasn't there to litigate feelings. She was there to reconcile minutes. Her desk was a topography of order, color-coded binders for each grade, a stack of visitor CSV exports clipped by week, a laminated flowchart for attendance exceptions, and a strip of tape along the counter where IDs rest for scanning, so the lens always finds them in the same place. Logs don't lie, she said without warmth or malice, just the creed of a person who believes children travel more safely through systems than through stories. She slid me the request form and pointed to 4 blanks. Date range, purpose, parent access. Pick up time so we don't pull you from the line, and sign here to acknowledge chain of custody. The front desk aide, eyes quick, lanyard. Tangled with the year's fundraiser charms, clocked away my hands steadied when paper took the lead. She manages the badge system, and she treats it like a small airport. Arrivals, departures, reasons, gates. While the attendance officer cued my report, the aide toggled to the visitor dashboard, verified my profile photo and clearance, and jotted my badge numbers down a column so any page that left the office could be traced back to the moment a light blinked green at the kiosk. We'll staple the printouts to the request, she said. Nothing drifts. I asked for the counselor next, not to plead, to place. She keeps duty rosters, who covers recess when subs don't show, who unlocks STEM, who sits with the child who needs quiet when the cafeteria gets loud. Her office smells like dry erase and peppermint, and her whiteboard carries more truth than most inboxes. I told her I wanted dates, not sympathy. She pulled the rostering spreadsheet, scrolled to the month he likes to throw at me when he says, she never shows up, and put her finger on the cells where my initials anchor shifts no one else could cover. I'll email the view only, she said. You can reference it without making me chase versions. It was the opposite of drama. It was adult. The PTA treasurer, bless the math, rounded out the circle. She converts hours into dollars when we apply for community grants. Her formulas know the exchange rate between time and books. In a hallway that smells faintly of tempera paint and hope, she opened her laptop on a custodial cart and pulled the sheet where my initials become funding lines. Lunch duty credits for recess equipment, library shifts that unlocked the literacy mini grant, book fare totals that padded the field trip account so no kid would stay home for lack of $7. I'll certify, she said, and when a treasurer says certify, you can feel the room get sturdier. They help for reasons that had nothing to do with liking me. Procedure outranks personality in a building that takes children from 7:45 to 2:45 and returns them intact. The attendance officer loves timestamps because timestamps keep grown-ups honest. The front desk aide loves the badge system because it doesn't care who tells the best story. It cares which barcodes were scanned. The counselor loves rosters because they protect kids from the gaps where adults' egos fail. The treasurer loves hours because hours turn into grants that turn into sensory bins, microscopes, and shoes that squeak less. Child-centered beats parent-centered every day. They weren't picking me. They were picking the path that gets students home with their names spelled right. I made a checklist in the lobby chair beneath the corkboard with lost mittens and chess club flyers. Request form filled, signed, dated. ID scan completed. The aide verified the number on the screen matched the plastic in my hand. Date range, semester to date, plus today's live feed to stop. Anyone from pretending the present is a blur. Pickup time. I wrote the slot printed on my card tag so the office would know when not to call me to the counter. Chain of custody note. Printouts stapled to request, sealed in manila, handoff at dismissal with principal present. I initialed the line that acknowledges that documents change hands exactly once in front of a witness. If the paper would be asked to tell the truth later, it would also be able to testify about who touched it. Containment mattered. I told myself no hallway debates, no counter-arguments at the curb, no reactivity that could be clipped into a narrative and played for an audience that likes its mothers either saintly or hysterical. One institutional voice. If anyone asked me to explain myself under the awning with the peeling blue line, I would say, the office is preparing a readout. If he performed for the pickup crowd, I would look at the cones and count the numbers painted on their bases. If a teacher with kind eyes tried to referee, I would thank her, square my shoulders, and point to the glass. Records are in process. You cannot outrun gossip, but you can outlast it by refusing to feed it on school grounds. The attendance officer emerged from the copier room with a stack that looked heavier than it was and laid it on the counter without flourish. On top, the request form, my signature steady, today's date in the corner. Beneath it, visitor check-ins for the semester, badge numbers aligned with entry times to the minute. After that, a supplemental page the front desk aide had generated, listing purposes by color, green for recess, blue for library, orange for lunch duty, yellow for STEM, so a glance could translate into a picture even a tired principal could parse between fire drills. The counselor's roster screenshot sat next, annotated with initials. The treasurer's certification closed the set with a line that turned the hours into a dollar amount the grant committees would recognize. Finally, a chain of custody stickers straddled the envelope flap like a small necessary oath. "Do you want to preview it?" the aide asked, hand on the seal, eyes on my face. I shook my head because I wanted the principal to be the first adult to read it aloud after me. Not because I craved authority, but because children do better when hierarchy and accuracy shake hands. The aide pressed the seal, wrote my last name in block letters on the manila, and slid the envelope into a drawer that locks with a key attached to a coil around her wrist. "Dismissal," she said. Inside voice. I walked out into the hallway where artwork lined the walls, self-portraits with eyes too big and ears too brave, and practiced the sentence I would use if he started early. "We can review the printouts at dismissal, principal present." I let it sit in my mouth until it lost every flavor but calm. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. The ache didn't need an audience. It needed a table and paper and a witness. At pickup, the lot glinted with late sun, and the car line breathed like a patient beast learning to trust its handlers. He stood by the awning rehearsing worry for anyone who'd rent it. I kept my place, kept my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, kept my mouth closed. The badge printer blinked through the office window like a lighthouse. My phone buzzed once in the cup holder, the tone I'd set for school numbers so I never missed the one call that matters. The text previewed on my screen with the neutrality that makes adults behave. "We can review the printouts at dismissal, principal present." Control doesn't shout. It initial stamps. The office runs on a grammar that forgives nothing and protects everything. Badge scan, timestamp, destination room, staff initials, exit time. That chain is a sentence with subjects and verbs you can point to. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. I carried that ache into paper and let the paper carry me back out. At the visitor kiosk, my name becomes a barcode. The scanner blinks. The system assigns a tick. J1407 to 11, and the aide selects the purpose from a drop-down. Library aide. I sign the clipboard at the door with the same name the printer just used, the same time rounded to the quarter minute, and the teacher initials in the margin because adults should never move around children without leaving tracks. When I leave, the aide clicks out, and the badge printer enters a second tick against the first. In between those ticks live children who had their hands washed, noses wiped, books shelved, dice counted, and the floor swept of glitter that never fully goes away. You can argue about tone. You cannot argue about ticks. I learned quickly that a visitor log is the passport and a volunteer ledger is the visas. The log says who entered and when. The ledger says what was done and why it matters. Duty sign-up is an interest list that flatters us. Cleared shifts are the ledger of adults who actually showed up after background checks, orientation, and the email that says, "Please report to room 205." The treasurer's spreadsheet converts cleared minutes into match dollars for grants. 50 documented hours in the library becomes $250 for new leveled readers. 40 lunch duty hours turns into 2 class sets of headphones. 12 hours in STEM buys copper tape and batteries for 4th grade circuits. The math offends no one because it blesses everyone the same way, quietly, in ordered columns, with totals that outlast homecoming photos. So I built my record with the precision the building deserves. On my kitchen table, calendar magnets pushed to the side, permission slips. Clipped to the fruit bowl, I opened my Google Calendar and exported a bot IACs of every block titled Pickup, Library, Lunch Duty, STEM, Recess. I printed the week view because the grid helps my eyes behave when feelings try to swerve. Next, I opened Gmail, filtered for from .teacherschool.org and subject volunteer, reminder, thanks, schedule, and printed the threads that start with, "Are you still good for tomorrow?" and end with, "Couldn't have done it without you." I pulled the Remind app on my phone and scrolled through notifications that timestamp my sign-ins with the office's own automated visitor checked into campus pings, each one carrying the exact minute I crossed the threshold. I didn't chase compliments, I chased clocks. Then I dragged photo metadata into daylight. The book fair snapshot with me behind the register. Taken 10:42 a.m. Tuesday, ISO 200, focal length 26 ammeter, geotag pinned to the library. The 4th grade lunch table where I taught a new kid how to open his stubborn milk carton. 7 p.m. Thursday, cafeteria geofence. Phones narc on you in a way that saves you if you're telling the truth. I printed the EXIF summaries and clipped them behind the emails, letting light and pixels annotate what words can't convince on their own. At school, I asked the attendance officer for the raw CSV of my badge scans for the semester. She exported, printed, highlighted the in-note pairs, and wrote her initials at the bottom of each page. "So it isn't just the system talking," she said, pen clicking back with a sound that could be a period. The front desk aide added a one-page legend. Green tells her library aide, blue tells her lunch duty, yellow tells recess, orange tells STEM lab, gray tells conference or counselor sign-in. Color makes busy brains merciful, and I wanted mercy for the principal who would have to shepherd us through dismissal without turning the lobby into a stage. My stance held, neutral tone, exhibits tabbed, no adjectives. Exhibit A, visitor log summary, semester to date, sorted by date. Exhibit B, volunteer ledger extract, cleared shifts only with staff initials. Exhibit C, duty rosters, counselor's view, only print, my initials circled in pen. Exhibit D, PTA treasurer match, minutes to dollars, signed and dated. Exhibit E, parent calendar, exported entries, with a key that maps pickup to badge scans. Exhibit F, email confirmations, teacher threads bracketed by request and thanks. Exhibit G, remind notifications, system pings with times. Exhibit H, photo metadata, EXIF summaries with thumbnails. Exhibit I, chain of custody, request form, ID scan receipt, envelope seal number, aide's initials. At the top of the stack, I taped a single sentence the attendance officer suggested. For review and service of student welfare. Cross-matching is where the noise dies. I held his claim, she never shows up, against my grid like a transparency on an overhead projector. The day he told the soccer sideline I missed the open house. My badge scanned at 17:03:28. Destination room 112. Purpose, open house, teacher meet. The photo on my phone shows my son holding his All About Me poster at 17:21 with our classroom door number in the background. The teacher's email from that night reads, "Thank you for helping the twins find their stations." The treasurer's ledger marks 20 minutes of setup for the sign-in table before doors opened. One day, 4 proofs, 0 adjectives. The Friday he told the office aide, loudly, that some mom's work, as if the rest of us scrapbook for a living. The log shows me in at 11:32 for lunch duty. Out at 12:59, with the counselor's initials verifying, I covered a meltdown table while a para walked a student. The remind ping that afternoon. Thanks to today's lunch volunteers, fewer spills than yesterday. I printed the counselor's incident note. Not the details, just the header with date, time, and the line parent volunteer present. Children's privacy stayed intact. My presence didn't. The week he performed concern at pickup, she hasn't been around at all, falls on the same calendar square where I ran the book fair register Tuesday and Thursday from 9:30 to 12 and loaded the truck Friday at 14:15 after dismissal so the librarian could make it to her own kids' recital. The librarian's email says, "You talk kids into books with the patience of a saint," which I blacked out because saints aren't admissible. I left the timestamps. Patience doesn't travel on paper. Minutes do. I didn't print the text where he told me to stay invisible at drop-off for custody optics. They would have felt like gasoline. I printed instead the co-parent communication addendum he signed, the one that says school record access parity and documentation preference govern disputes on campus. One paragraph, 2 signatures, one place for a principal to rest her eyes if the hallway starts to pulse. The building's job is not to referee our marriage, it's to protect our child's mourning. My voice stayed inside a single rehearsed lane. When I met the principal in the office doorway, I handed her the envelope and the one-sentence cover. For your review, visitor logs and volunteer ledger entries relevant to statements made at dismissal. I did not look toward the awning where he was writing his face for the audience. I looked at the badge printer blinking its slow, faithful metronome. He tried to draw me into a curbside panel discussion. Tell them you missed last Thursday, right? And I let the cones hold my attention, orange numbers stenciled at their bases. The aide opened the door to the office. The principal gestured us in. The attendance officer slid on her readers, flipped the envelope seal with the chain of custody sticker intact, and squared the stack as if aligning a compass. We'll take these in order, the principal said, voice set to hallway calm, not courtroom thunder. The attendance officer narrated the chain like it was a route on a school map. Badge scan, timestamp, destination room, staff initials, exit time. She matched my calendar export to her CSV, my remind pings to her log, my XIF times to her kiosk ticks. The treasurer explained the conversion of minutes to dollars in a tone that could sell a bond issue. Patient, precise, unavoidable. Nobody raised a voice. Nobody rolled an eye. The facts did what facts do when adults agree to be held still by them. The aide drew a yellow highlighter down the rows that corresponded to the very days his voice had tried to redline my worth, and the color made the story easier for even the tired parts of my brain to read. The office phone rang once. The aide silenced it. The copier hummed like a steady breath. The principal capped the highlighter and looked up at me and then at him, the way a teacher looks up before she returns, graded work. Fair, unflinching, ready to move on. Her inbox pinged, and the attendance officer smiled the small smile of a person whose system just confirmed its own integrity. She angled the screen so the room could see the message without reading private lines aloud. Then she set her hand flat on the printout, the way someone blesses a meal in a cafeteria that feeds 1,000 unremarkable mercies a week, and asked a question that felt like the first adult sentence spoken in days. Your logged hours cover days he claims you weren't there. Want those flagged? I didn't bring lipstick. I brought minutes. The pickup office isn't majestic, but it runs like a little airport for small hearts. Doors sighing, radios murmuring, the copier's steady breath, the badge printer waiting like a gate agent who never forgets a face. I walked in with my folio and a pulse I could count against the wall clock. Room geography first, because geography decides whether truth lands or drifts. Administrators cluster naturally along the counter ledge. Principal center, assistant principal a step back, attendance officer at the keyboard with her reading glasses perched on a chain that says she handles more emergencies than anyone claps for. My son waits on the blue bench under the Be Safe, Be Kind, Be Ready poster, backpack upright like a shield, knees together the way classrooms teach. Between us, the sign-in kiosk and a humming desk printer that sings in short bursts when the system recognizes a name. That's the machine I've chosen as my witness. I stand where custodians stand when they need a signature. Off to the side, not blocking the door, inside mic range for the ceiling tile speaker that carries announcements. My body learned long ago how to be present without becoming a scene. His little eyes dropped, and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. So I places the folio flat, spine left, tabs facing the officer, as if I'm passing a tray across a counter at a diner where the cook knows your order by month, not by mood. The fluorescent lights don't flatter. They clarify. I'm grateful for that. Risk map next. If he interrupts, which he will because performance is a muscle, my answer is one sentence, rehearsed until it doesn't tremble. Please let the attendance officer finish the readout. If a teacher overcomforts with a palm against my back and a hush meant for recess scrapes, I'll pivot so the hand lands on air and say, "We're okay, this is procedural." If a well-meaning parent tries to narrate, I'll point gently to the "Visitors Please Sign In" plaque and say, "We're signing into the truth." If anyone asks whether this is about custody, I'll give them the school's own language. This is about student welfare and accuracy. 4 lines, 1 breath each. No adjectives that would make a hallway into a headline. Artifacts packed by order of usefulness, not drama. On top, the check-in bundle. Semester to date CSV printed and initialed. In-out pairs highlighted in yellow because yellow tells tired eyes where to land without shouting. Under it, the volunteer ledger with staff initials on the right margin, the living proof that minutes turn into leveled readers and headphones and copper tape in 4th grade circuits. Next, the field trip roster with my name circled the day the bus left 5 minutes late, and I kept 4 kids from crying over a misplaced permission slip by inventing a scavenger hunt for shadows on the sidewalk. Then, the counselor memo. No student details, just the header that says parent volunteer present during incident. Staff follow procedure. Students safe. Behind those, in their own quiet sleeves, remind pings, teacher thank yous, calendar exports, and photo EXIF strips that don't care whether anyone clapped. I brief the attendance officer like she's my co-pilot, which she is. Purpose is alignment, I say, because purpose matters more than posture. She nods and taps the keyboard with the authority of a person who has outlived 3 software upgrades and a dozen hot takes in the pickup lane. She places a sticky note at the top of the bundle, requested by parent, ID verified, because chain of custody is how adults remember later what they did when the room was hot. The principal slides into place with hallway calm. She doesn't grab the packet. She waits for the officer to own the handoff. I love this school for that. I clock my son again. He's watching my mouth the way kids watch a teacher's hands when the science experiment starts to smoke. I give him the smallest nod, same one I used behind the book fair register when he wasn't sure if he could count change while his friends watched. The nod says, "You're safe even if adults are sorting themselves out." It also says, "I'm not a storm, I am the barometer." He enters. On cue, like a man who believes the door is a stage. He speaks before the door clicks shut, volume calibrated for teachers within earshot. "We don't need a printout," he says, smile shiny, eyes scanning for an ally. The principal's gaze doesn't move from the counter. The officer's finger does not leave the enter key. He tries again, softer this time, for me alone. "Let's not make a thing." The officer's keyboard sings back a little arpeggio as the system cues the report. A teacher passing with a stack of Friday folders mirrors my stance without meaning to. Neutral, ready, uninterested in theater. I anticipate where feelings might trip facts and remove the rug. "We're not debating," I say to the room, not to him. "We're reviewing." The word reviewing slides the temperature down a degree. The principal steps forward the inch that means jurisdiction. "We'll read the system," she says, which is the administrative way to say, "We do not adjudicate narratives, we verify records." The assistant principal positions himself near the doorway, not to block, to witness. In schools, witnessing is protection. The officer begins with the short form because attention scatters after the first screen. Date, time, purpose, destination. She reads 3 lines from 3 days he's performed "She Never Shows Up," and the yellow highlight runs across the paper like crosswalk paint. 10:42, library aid. 11:32, lunch duty. 14:06, STEM lab. She places my license on the counter beside the packet so the plastic can talk to the paper without me adding air. She checks off each match. CSV to remind ping, ledger initial to teacher email, quietly, like a nurse confirming vitals. The principal watches the audit, not the faces. He tries the teacher voice, friendly, insistent. We all know who does what. And a teacher behind him exhales into her sleeve in the universal language of adults who grade on proof, not charm. The counselor steps in, carrying a clipboard that looks like every policy we've ever needed and couldn't find on our phones. We're aligning, she says, and the word lands like furniture being set square in a room that's been crooked for a year. I do not look at him. I look at the badge printer because it has never lied to me. I look at my son, who is now looking at the yellow lines like they might be roads his feet can trust. I look at the Be Safe, Be Kind, Be Ready poster and think how kindness without readiness becomes enabling, and readiness without kindness becomes brittle. Today is for both. The officer slides the field trip roster forward, her nail tapping my circled name on the day he bragged at soccer that he pulled the weight of 3 parents. She reads the counselor memo header on the day he said, I stirred drama at lunch, and the memo says parent volunteer present, de-escalation supported, return to class achieved. She sets aside the teacher's thank you note because gratitude is beautiful and inadmissible. We keep only what survives the copier without softening. He moves closer to the counter, fishing for a line that will turn the office into a jury. She's making this about me, he says, and the principal finally lifts her eyes, not unkind, to the place where his words have landed all week. We make this about the student, she says. We always will. The radio on the shelf crackles with a bustling update, and the world remembers it must keep moving. I sign the district's request form with the same hand that punched the lunch code into my phone every Tuesday. The officer initials each page, the aide stamps the footer with a tiny clock, the counselor notes, parent acknowledged readout. I don't touch the highlighter, I let the institution color its own margins. My son lifts his head. That's the only meter I've ever trusted. The ache in my throat loosens, not because anyone apologized, but because the printer has decided to sing. The first sheet curls out warm, then the second, then the third, and the sound is so ordinary it feels holy. The printer warms. The officer lays out a highlighter and a pen for signatures. She never shows up, he repeats. Paper answers. He says it again like a slogan he printed on his tongue for the car line. She never shows up. The words slide over tile and under the glass partition and land in my son's shoes. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. I step into the light of the counter the way you step onto a scale. Calm, squared, ready to see the number that already exists. I place my license on the laminate where the attendance officer prefers it, long edge flush with the please have ID ready tent. For the record, I say, voice even but audible to the doorway and the blue bench, may we review today's and semester to date? The office answers like a machine built to tell the truth. The badge printer wakes with a soft hum and a blinking green eye. The officer, steady hands, chain glasses, slides the mouse, clicks the report icon, and the screen fills with lines that look like rails heading toward a town where facts live. She nods once to the principal, a tiny baton pass without music. The principal returns a nod that says, proceed. Behind me, hallway hush. Down the corridor, a teacher's laugh fades into the carpet. Beside my knee, my son's sneakers scuff. A quiet Morse code that says he is listening to how grown-ups behave when words get sharp. He tries charm at a lower volume, field voice friendly for teachers within range. We don't need to make a deal out of check-ins, he offers, smirk thinning into something that reads as reasonable if you don't know what it costs children to swallow untruth. The officer clicks again, and the printer answers with a slow feed of white. First page, then the next. She uncaps a highlighter. The plastic cap pops with a clean click that sounds to me like a latch on a fence gate I've closed 1,000 times to keep calves from wandering. She draws one straight yellow line across my name for today. In 1058, purpose, classroom support, destination, 2nd grade. The ink glows. Nobody argues with glow. I keep my body small on purpose. Elbows close, palms flat to the folio. chin level so microphones in the ceiling catch words, not weather. He shifts closer, testing boundaries like a kid in a museum. It's about consistency, he says to the principal, performing collaboration. Some moms don't have time. The principal doesn't blink. We'll read the system, she answers, the school's mantra when adults need reminding that memory is a poor filing cabinet. The counselor steps from her doorway with a clipboard tucked to her ribs and takes a position near the bench, a quiet declaration that the child gets a witness to. Please read the check-ins, I say. And that's all I will give this scene. No adjectives, no history lesson, no flavor notes on the mornings I signed in with coffee breath and a ponytail and the kind of fatigue you can polish with a smile. The officer's cadence lands like tick marks on a ruler. Visitor, mother, she reads. In 1058, out 12 each 16, classroom support, Ms. Diaz. She compares the initials at the right margin with the roll sheet signature. Her pen taps twice when they agree. Highlighter glides. Next page, last Thursday, book fair. Last Wednesday, lunch duty, the Tuesday before. STEM lab circuits where my hands smelled like copper tape all afternoon. Yellow wakes each line like sunrise. He tries a soft, come on for me alone, head angled so his voice slides under the glass. We're good, he says, a phrase that has served him at banquets and backyards, and one too many parent nights. My son's toe scuffs again. Scourge. I don't look away from the paper. I look at the date column, at the times, at the way the font makes all names equal height regardless of posture. The office aide, who sees everything in the indifferent light of mid-afternoon, angles the stack so the principal can see the footer. Report generated by attendance. Time 3:07 p.m. Chain of custody in 10-point type. The hallway listens. A teacher pauses with Friday folders hugged to her chest and watches the highlighter draw another stripe. She knows that yellow the way she knows the sound of a pencil falling in a quiet room. Outside, a whistle blows for buses. Inside, the highlighter keeps time. He pivots to concerned co-parent, a costume he wears like a blazer. I'm just saying, routines matter. He offers. The counselor answers without looking up from her clipboard. They do. This is the routine. The officer's finger rests on the trackpad like a gavel that never needs to strike. I inhale on 4, hold 4, out on 6. The badge printer hums. The highlighter clicks open, close open as the officer flips pages. She reads dates without drama. September 12th, visitor mother, purpose, book fair setup, in 7:41, out 9:12. October 3rd, visitor mother, purpose, field trip chaperone, in 8:05, out 2:37. She pauses to match a teacher email stapled behind the ledger line. Thank you for calming the lunchroom spill. We got through the drill. She doesn't read the thank you aloud. Gratitude is lovely. We are here for proof. He inches a palm toward the stack like he might help, and the principal's hand floats up a half-inch, gentle traffic cop. We'll let Miss Hargrove finish, she says, naming the officer, reminding him the system has a human he does not outrank. His smirk thins one more degree, the way ice loses its confidence when a boot heel tests it. The aide sets a second pen on the counter for my signature. I leave it there until the reading is complete, because order itself is a kind of mercy. My son's knees loosen. He leans forward 1 inch, eyes on yellow like kids look at lane lines in a pool before they trust the water. He gets it before anyone narrates it for him. A parent who never shows up shouldn't have glowing stripes that cross half a semester. The officer turns to the volunteer ledger. Different form, same spine. Staff initials neat in the right margin. Hours totaled at the bottom because minutes convert to grants that buy headphones and library cards. Volunteer, mother, STEM lab, 90 minutes. Volunteer, mother, lunch duty, 75 minutes. Ink meets paper, paper meets policy. Policy meets a child's face and offers it back to him unbent. He exhales a laugh that tastes like aluminum. So what? She came a couple times, and stops when the officer lifts a palm. No scold, no heat, just the universal sign that says, we're not done. We'll complete the readout, she says, same cadence she uses for fire drills and rainy day dismissals. The principal's nod is almost invisible now, not performance anymore, only power being modest about itself. I sign the request form. The 8 stamps received with a tiny clock that kisses the corner. The counselor writes, "Parent acknowledged, student present," on her pad because students remember differently when they hear adults tell the truth beside them. The printer spits another page warm against the stack. The office air holds still in the way rooms do when they decide to be useful. He's running low on costumes. "This is embarrassing," he tries, pitching it to the room, hoping someone will hand him a coat. The principal moves 1 inch closer to my son and says, "We're modeling transparency." The sentence hangs there like a poster you didn't notice until you needed it. My son lifts his head. That is the only applause I will accept. The officer aligns the final pages, edges squared, corners crisp. She draws one bright line across the summary row, then taps her pen once. The way a metronome taps a musician back into truth. The stack looks like a small, ordinary miracle. 10 weeks of Tuesdays and Thursdays and the in-betweens when life runs on schedules that don't trend. She lifts the bundle so the header meets the principal's eye line, then mine, then, because schools understand theater only when it serves the lesson, angles it toward the doorway where he stands with his hand suddenly without a pocket to live in. The hallway hush deepens. The highlighter's yellow sits on the page like daylight. The officer stacks pages, yellow lines glowing. Visitor, mother, purpose, classroom support. Total visits 47. Numbers don't tremble. People do. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. The attendance officer squares the stack like she's aligning a compass with true north, then begins with a cadence that refuses drama and therefore carries power. September 5th, she reads, in 741, out 912, location, Media Center, staff initials, MD. Yellow rides the line, clean and bright. Cross-reference, volunteer ledger page 3, book fair setup, 87 minutes posted. The highlighter glows, the printer breathes, someone's phone goes dark mid-scroll because the room has remembered what it's for. September 12th, she continues, tone steady as a metronome. In 1058, out 1216, destination, room 204, staff initials AD, crossref, duty roster, lunch a block. She doesn't look up to see whether it lands. She's flown this approach before. She trusts instruments. The principal stands at a diagonal so she can see the timestamps and the margin initials without blocking the door. The counselor takes one step closer to my son and tilts the clipboard so only he can see the smiley face she drew in the corner the first week of school. He doesn't smile back yet, but his shoes stop scuffing. Stillness is how kids vote when they don't have ballots. What counts as showing up, the principal says evenly, is the system we use for every adult in this building. Scan, time, destination, staff initials at arrival and release. She doesn't glance at him, doesn't invite his rebuttal. She speaks to the air on purpose, so the air can hold it later when stories try to edit memory. Logged minutes fund programs, she adds, one sentence long, like a label on a wire you're about to carry. Our grants match volunteer hours. When a parent signs in to shelve, read, staple, or stand in a hallway through indoor recess, those minutes become headphones, books, counselors, supplies. The PTA treasurer, called in from the workroom by the hush, nods once from the threshold and then tucks back out. Her part done. Corroboration by presence. He shifts in the doorway, smirk thinning, trying to locate the audience that used to find him. It's not a competition, he offers, hands spread, American theater of reasonableness. I'm just concerned about consistency. The officer answers without breaking cadence, which is a kind of mercy. September 19th, she reads, in 805, out 237, destination, field trip, Museum of Natural History, staff initials, RC on bus manifest, DL on return. She taps the corner where the teacher's initials live like a small flag. Crossref, field trip roster, chaperone mother, group C. The yellow drifts over the text like daylight finding a floor. Phones slide into pockets. A teacher freezes at the copy machine and listens with her head half turned, that public school sixth sense that knows when a teachable moment has wandered into the front office. The office aide watches the clock in the top right of the screen. 311, 312, 313, numbers wearing the same calm face they wore at 7:30 when she printed tardy slips. Numbers don't tremble. People do. I keep my eyes on the paper because paper is the only face that won't flinch. I'm not performing martyrdom, I'm performing procedure. Breath in 4, hold 4, out 6, palms flat. Thumb resting on the edge of the folio where the counselor's memo peeks out. Parent completed crisis drill training, cleared for hall support. He tries a softer angle, pitched just for me. We could talk about this later, he murmurs, but later is where wives go to be rewritten. I prefer now, under the fluorescent honesty of a district issue fixture, with a printer that squeaks on every third page and a highlighter that doesn't care who pays the mortgage. The principal plants the guardrail so no one mistakes this for a show. We're clarifying record as part of dismissal, she says to the room, and the phrase routine clarification drapes itself over the counter like a protective cloth. The officer nods, finds October, and keeps reading. October 3rd in 1102, out 1217, room 204. STEM circuits, staff initials AD. Crossref, volunteer ledger page 5, 90 minutes. The highlighter breathes across the row. October 10th in 755, out 833, door 2, morning greeter, initials, SC. Crossref, duty roster, greeter A. Another line wakes. My son's hands come out of his hoodie pocket and rest on his knees, fingers open. He's tracking the pattern. Date, time, place. Adult who saw it. This is what showing up looks like when you peel off the rhetoric. He laughs once, metal in it. So she came a handful of times, he says, aiming the sentence at the ceiling in case anyone up there needs his summary. The officer flips to the summary page like she's been waiting for that cue. For the record, she says without heat, we'll tally. The printer coughs, a fresh sheet slides out warm. The aide caps the highlighter, uncaps it, caps it. Click, click, that paces the room. The principal angles the page so the header is legible to anyone who might pretend not to understand the footers. The officer totals in pencil first, because pencil is how public servants flirt with perfection. September visits, she murmurs, 14. She writes the number, then inks it. October to date, eyes skating the column. 19. Ink again. She draws a line beneath and makes a small box for YTD. Habit you only get by doing a thing right 100 times. She doesn't announce the sum yet. She flips to the ledger where minutes convert to money. Volunteer minutes posted, she reads. StimLab 90, lunch duty 75, book fare 180, morning greeter 38, field trip 322, including transit to and from. She pauses. The counselor tilts the pad so my son can see the list of jobs that sound invisible until you hear them add up. Crossref, PTA grant match application, the officer adds, tapping the footer. Minutes logged here are dollars there. Translation complete. He tries one more costume. Self-deprecating dad. Look, nobody's perfect. And the principal's eyebrows rise 1 gentle millimeter, enough to remind the room that perfection isn't the measure. Participation is. We're not evaluating character, she says. We're acknowledging attendance. Her tone could slice an apple without bruising it. The copy machine wakes, spits a page, quiets. The hallway clock clicks once. Dismissal murmurs build like distant surf. My stillness does what speeches never could. I don't flinch, don't gloat, don't feed the narrative that wants women to win with tears. I let the stack exist between us like a small, bright city we can both read. The officer traces one final column with her fingertip, the way you teach a child to track a line when the sentence is long. She circles a date he claimed I wasn't there and lays the volunteer ledger on top of it. 2 forms, 1 truth. The yellow blooms. His jaw moves like it's learning to read. The principal lifts her hand in a small closing gesture, the way conductors settle a hall before the last bar. We'll place these in the student file, she says. If either parent needs copies, we can provide them with ID. Policy tucks the room in like blankets. No victory laps, no shame required. Just file, print, sign, exit. The officer aligns the pages one last time. Spine square, corners flush. She writes the total with the neatness of a person who knows that in some homes, clarity is the only safe thing to carry through the door. The aide stamps the corner, received, with a date that will outlive this argument. My son looks at me, not to ask, but to witness. I nod once. You saw what the grown-up saw. He opens his mouth and then closes it because there is nothing left to negotiate with when the yellow has finished its work. The room exhales. A bus bell rings. A sneaker squeaks. The printer cools. The officer reads the final line the way you read a truth to a room that needs it to stand up straight. She doesn't add a flourish. She doesn't look for a camera. She just lets the sentence land where it belongs. Parent volunteer hours. YTD 136. Verification complete. The first thing to leave is judgment. The second is noise. His little eyes dropped, and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. The stack of yellow-lit lines lay between us like a crosswalk everyone now had to honor, and the room, which a minute ago had buzzed with the end-of-day shuffle, adjusted itself to a quieter temperature, the kind where adults remember that children live here. The copier stilled mid-warm-up. The front desk phone rang once and was silenced with a practiced two-finger tap. A teacher who had been hovering with late bus slips placed them on the counter and eased back toward the hall as if retreating from a nest. The counselor, eyes soft but spine set, gestured us toward the corner with the beanbag and the poster about big feelings, an invitation that doubled as a boundary. You may step out of the crowd now, or you may stay where the record is, but you will not drag the hallway into theater. Dismissal, which answers to bells and buses more than bravado, kept its schedule. Walkers flowed past the office window in a river of patterned backpacks and half-tied shoes. The assistant principal called the carpool numbers with the cadence of a radio show host determined to land the hour on time. Apara slid the door open for the sensory break room and closed it with the same care she gives to a jar of beads. Inside the office, the principal returned the readout pages to their clear sleeve and set them on the corner of the counter where the light is honest. She did not tuck them out of sight. She did not fan them like cards. She let them exist as furniture. My son's breathing even the tiniest bit, that barely there shift a mother learns to hear through walls. He kept his gaze near the floor tile seam he had been tracing with his shoe, but his shoulders, which had risen toward his ears when the sentence, "She never shows up," tried to put a costume on his mother, began to settle back where childhood can reach them. He was listening not to words, but to the absence of argument. There is a holiness in adult quiet that children track like birds track pressure. He broke first, not with apology, not with reflection, but with the instinct that had always saved him in rooms that favored performance. "Fix it," he whispered, the syllable shaped for secrecy but pointed at the people who could hear anyway, because secrecy has always relied on witnesses who pretend they aren't. "Just tell them it's complicated. Say the system missed some. We don't need—" He gestured at the pages as if numbers were an affront when they refused to belong to him. The attendance officer, who respects timestamps more than charisma, adjusted her reading glasses on the chain that says, "She will meet you where you are as long as where you are includes the truth." Policy already answered. She said, not unkindly, "We clarified the record. Dismissal needs the hallway back." I offered the only sentence I promised myself I would spend today. "Let the record stand." I didn't lace it with threat or victory. I placed it like a level on a beam. The bubble centered. He reached for a grin that used to soften rooms and found no purchase. Smiles have nothing to grip on paper. He tried a sigh that asked for pity. The counselor who has seen pity shrink kids pivoted the conversation toward tomorrow. "We can schedule a restorative conference," she said, already sliding a half-sheet template from the stacked forms she keeps like first aid. "Principal, attendance, counselor, both parents, clear goals, time-limited, child-centered." The principal nodded once, a motion that doubled as consent and as a reminder that this building runs on clocks. "We'll do morning," she added. Home routines heal better when schools keep their promises. He tried again, because habit is a river even when a bridge crosses it. "This makes us look divided," he said, aiming the word us like a lifesaver. The office aide, who has watched a decade of divorces and reconciliations move through the same doorway, capped the highlighter with a calm click, and placed it on top of the stack like a period. "We're focused on the student file," she said, routing the energy toward the folder that matters. The counselor took notes in shorthand. Dates, next steps, who speaks first, because notes prevent spin from becoming the only document a child remembers. Through the glass, a kindergartner pressed both hands to the pane and fogged it into a cloud that looked briefly like a heart. A fifth grader returned a library book with a cover about rockets and asked the aide if he was still good for launch, and the aide said, "Always," and scanned the barcode like a blessing. The building carried on with its free, small mercies, exactly as it should. He bent closer, voice a hush meant to sound intimate and land strategic. "You win," he said, like the board game we never finished because he tilted rules when bored. "Is that what you needed?" I kept my face steady so my son would have a place to rest his eyes that wasn't a scoreboard. "What I needed," I said, not louder, not sweeter, was for our child to see adults behave when facts arrive. The principal glanced at the analog clock and lifted 2 fingers. Rap. The counselor slid her note into a folder labeled "Follow Up" because adults who write things down are less likely to rewrite children. He reached for one last louver, the one that had moved rooms at recitals and family dinners. "We can tell him together that this wasn't a big deal," he offered, turning to my son with a hand that hovered too close to a shoulder that had just learned it could lower. The counselor stepped between gesture and target with the slipstream of a veteran. "We'll keep language small and accurate," she said, and coached the sentence we would both use or neither. The office clarified the sign-in record. "We'll meet tomorrow to make a plan." She wrote it on a sticky note and handed one to each of us, because fidelity to wording is a safety rail when storms like to shift direction overnight. Car tags were being held up at the window now. Last call for walkers had been made. The office door opened and closed with the gentle rhythm of a machine that refuses to grind. He stood there, waiting for a private corridor he could control. There wasn't one. The school had returned itself to service. The attendance officer filed the copies into the student record with a motion that looked like respect. The principal signed the next day invite. The counselor handed my son a hall pass with a star in the corner and the words, "You did your job today." He tried the last question people use when they want to salvage an image from a mirror that has started telling the truth. "Was any of it real?" he asked, and his voice carried a history of birthdays, practices, the Tuesday night homework rescues we each did in different rooms, the story he wanted our child to memorize because it keeps adults from having to grow. The hallway eased its volume like an audience leaning toward a piano. My son looked between us and then, grateful for something that wasn't a choice, tucked the hall pass into his pocket. I didn't rush to fill the space. I let the quiet show my son how to stand inside it without drowning. I thought about the calendar magnets I'd moved 100 times to make orchestra and pickup, and a grant audit fit in a week that refused to grow. I thought about the officer's glasses chain, the principal's 1 millimeter eyebrow, the aide's click that had sounded like more care than some apologies. I thought about his sentence in the lot. "She never shows up," and how easily children absorb weather if adults call it climate. I thought about my boy's shoes finding the seam in the tile and staying there, steady, while the room practiced being a place that keeps him safe. Then I gave him a truth he couldn't spin. Real power sounds like a policy, not a pickup line. His little eyes dropped, and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. That sentence from yesterday kept looping while I walked into the conference room that smells like dry erase and lemon cleaner, where a rectangle of chairs promised procedure instead of theater, and where the principal, the counselor, and the attendance officer waited with folders stacked like bricks that could hold up the day if we set them right. The principal opened with a roll call of what we would and wouldn't be doing. We would review documentation, we would define conduct expectations on campus and in the pickup zone. We would agree to a path for questions that begins with records and ends with adults, and we would not litigate character, assign motives, or let a child's schedule be hijacked by grown-up appetites for a scene. I nodded because dignity wears better when someone else names it first, and the attendance officer slid the check-in packet across to me like a promise that survived the night. The officer read the header aloud as if the phrase could become a backbone. "Visitor Management System, parent check-in summary, semester to date, and the cadence of date, time, destination, staff initials sounded like the opposite of gossip, the kind of music a school runs on when it refuses to lose its tune to anyone's volume. She pointed to the yellow lines she had highlighted where my badge prints overlapped the days he'd performed Never Shows Up, and she cross-referenced them with the volunteer ledger entries initial stamped by teachers who, in the ordinary rush of lunch duty and literacy blocks, had not thought they were notarizing a future moment of mercy. The counselor, who has a way of turning friction into norms that protect kids first, asked us to lock eyes with the expectations poster on the wall and translate it from hallway language into adult rules. We don't generalize, we don't shout across a crowd, we don't make children the carrier pigeons for our messages, and we take disputes to desks where clocks, not egos, keep time. I came with reforms because grief and accuracy make a fierce committee when they sit at the same table. So I asked for a parent access guide to logs that uses plain English instead of portal screenshots, a one-pager that explains visitor versus volunteer records, how minutes convert to grant match, and what showing up means in systems that measure real labor instead of loud reputations. The attendance officer's pen was already moving. She proposed a sidebar box titled, What We Can Print for You and How to Ask. With a simple flow, show ID, select date range, pick up summary at the counter, sign chain of custody so nobody can pretend paper was smuggled out under a coat. I asked for clarity on volunteer credit because mothers like me have been paying interest on invisible hours since before anyone digitized front desks, so the PTA treasurer, looped in by speakerphone with her ledger open, suggested we adopt color categories that travel across forms and grants, classroom support in yellow, event shifts in blue, field trips in green, and we all agreed that when colors match, arguments melt. We wrote a staff script for allegations because the hallway deserves muscle memory that protects kids from performances, and the principal drafted it in 2 lines that fit on a lanyard card. We'll check the record and get back to you. Please keep dismissal moving. And for student matters, schedule with the counselor. For records, see the attendance office. The counselor added a child-first phrasing note that made me want to hug the poster. When speaking within earshot of students, name the system, not the person. So the record shows replaces your mother did or your father didn't, which lands like actual care instead of a whisper campaign printed on a backpack. We moved to communications posture because yesterday taught me how fast adult emotions can turn a school into a stage, so we agreed on neutral language to staff. Document, review, clarify, schedule, and we banned hallway theater by codifying where disagreements go to calm down. The office, with a door and a clock. Not the curb, not the crosswalk, not the car line where a child's eyes have to decide between shoes and shame. The principal committed to repeating that stance at staff meeting and in the Friday memo, not to make villains, but to grow habits that keep little hearts from carrying our static. The counselor offered sample sentences for teachers in the doorway whose care might otherwise turn into over-comforting, I see you, the office has it. Your job is to get home and rest. And I thought about how much healing lives in a single sentence that refuses to reward spectacle. Then we named the next steps because survival without sequence phrase. So we turned to the co-parent platform that had been languishing like a gym membership, and we made it mandatory for school communications, attendance questions, volunteer scheduling, and calendar changes. No more text at the curb that can be denied later. No more I didn't see it after a blast went out. No more putting teachers in the position of messenger between adults who write better when a screen records them. Boundaries around school contact went into the minutes like speed limits go into driver's ed. No contact with staff during dismissal except to answer a direct question. No recording in the office for proof. No using a child's listening ear as leverage. And any concern about check-ins starts with the attendance officer because she is the person who will actually print the thing and solve the problem. He tried to reroute the meeting back to optics, how this might look to coaches, to other parents, to the handful of men who treat pickup like a networking event, and the principal let him finish because courtesy is not the same as consent. Then she returned us to policy with that gentle gravity schools wield when they remember who they serve. We are not a platform for image. We are an institution for children. Our procedures will remain steady even when adult feelings spike. The officer added that we could annotate the days in question for future clarity. A parenthetical on the PDF that reads, "Parent present, volunteer role," and I felt that tiny muscle in my throat unclench because the future has fewer arguments when the past is legible. We closed by reviewing yesterday's script one more time to keep its mercy intact, how the office read the summary without adjectives, how the principal framed it as routine clarification, how the counselor protected my son from the sloppy reach of adult hands hunting for comfort that isn't theirs to take, and how dismissal continued on schedule, which is not a small thing when you need the world to keep running while your family learns a new way to walk. The officer asked me if I wanted copies for my file. I said yes, not to cradle them like a trophy, but to lay them in a folder that will calm me the next time my pulse tries to script a speech. On my way out, I stopped at the counter where the yellow badge printer lives and watched a mother I don't know sign in for mystery reader. Her nervous smile, the universal look of someone who hopes her effort makes a dent in the day, and the office aide handed her a sticker and asked if she needed directions, and I wanted to tell them both that directions are how we love each other in public buildings, arrows on laminate, names spelled right, timestamps that protect the shy. Outside, the pickup line rehearsed its daily ballet, cones like punctuation marks, whistles like commas, and I slid into the stream grateful for the grammar we had just agreed to share. My phone vibrated just once with the kind of subject line that doesn't need a drum roll because it carries the sound of adults committing to a process that will not ask a child to translate. A rectangle of calm on the screen where breath and ink made a promise to meet again in a room with chairs and no microphones and a clock we can all agree on. Calendar invite, restorative circle, teacher present, child optional. He asks if I love our kid. I ask if he's read a single log. His little eyes dropped and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. That ache followed me home and sat at the table like a fourth chair while he started with the question he thought would corner me back into softness. "Do you even love him?" he said, low, as if lower could make it true, as if volume were jurisdiction. I kept my hands open on the table and let the pencil roll to a stop between us. "I do," I said, "and the logs show it. Have you read one?" The pencil thudded against my palm like a tiny gavel. We agreed to try again without performance, inventory over emotion, signatures over speeches. I drew a line down a legal pad and titled the columns like a registrar. Event and proof. Pickups, drop-offs, conferences, interventions. The week I covered the book fair and lunch duty. The 3 STEM lab shifts that pushed the grant across the match line. For each, I wrote the exhibit. Badge scan, volunteer ledger, duty roster, staff initials, timestamp, room number. He reached for context, for the airbrush that once charmed friends at barbecues. I reached for paper. "On Wednesday, you say I didn't show up?" I read. But the visitor system prints my entry at 2:11 p.m., purpose, classroom support, initialed by Ms. Adler. He tried another angle, the one where a father's worry is supposed to outvote a mother's receipts. I turned the page and kept counting. We are equal parents, yes, but equal isn't a feeling, it's a trail. I slid the co-parent communication addendum he'd signed, still smelling faintly of copier heat, to the middle of the table. He had initialed beside school record access parity and documentation preference, his favorite flourish looping through the P like a brand. "We route through school channels," I said, tapping the clause with the pencil eraser. No curbside accusations, no hallway debates, no using staff like referees. He bristled at the word use, and then tried to soften it with a grin that once worked on restaurant hosts and PTA sign-in tables. "It's just heated," he offered. "Not anymore," I answered, and underlined the sentence about pickup rotation being in writing, not vibes. We set the schedule with the quiet seriousness of people dividing medicine. Mondays and Tuesdays me, Wednesdays him, Thursdays alternating, Fridays by who has Saturday sport drop. No surprises, no improvised heroics, no "I just happen to be nearby" rescues that make a child wonder if love is a pop quiz. He sighed, then searched for sympathy in places that used to hand it to him like mints. "You embarrass me," he said, as if embarrassment were evidence. "The officer embarrassed neither of us," I said. She read, The principal framed it as clarification, not spectacle. The counselor protected the kid. That's what it looks like when adults take turns being the walls instead of the wind. He stared at the edge of the table and bit his lip like a student realizing there was homework under the joke. I let the silence get big enough to breathe in. Then I moved to gratitude, because gratitude is the only way I know to keep a win from turning into a weapon. I opened my laptop and drafted notes that named accuracy out loud. To the attendance officer for steady cadence. To the front desk aide for running the badge system with patience that never leaks into sarcasm. To the counselor for scripting sentences that saved my son's small face from carrying adult heat. To the principal for stepping between policy and pride without putting a child in the middle. I wrote specifics, dates, shifts, how a highlighted line steadied a room, and CC'd the principal so my thanks could live in personnel files instead of evaporating in the nice weather of a hallway. Then I asked plainly for admin recognition hours for staff who keep the record clean under pressure. They made school safer with paper. I typed, that labor should count towards something that changes their day. He watched the emails collect in my drafts and looked injured in that way people do when praise travels past them to the right address. You're doing PR for them? He said, making PR sound like perfume. I'm doing record, I said, and sent the notes. The replies landed fast. Thank you. Copy kept on file. Recognition request will go to the next meeting. And my shoulders dropped in that small private way a body does when the world proves it remembers how to be procedural. We moved to boundaries like grown-ups, picking up the same fragile thing and agreeing not to drop it. All school communication on the platform. No direct text to teachers. No recruiting our son as a narrator of adult disagreements. No filming in offices for proof. No leaning on staff in doorways where the clock can't supervise. If one of us has a question about attendance or volunteer credit, we ask the attendance office like neighbors ask the post office, with names spelled right and ID ready. We wrote it all, signed it, and slid a PDF to the principal as a courtesy. He flinched at how official it felt and then let it sit. I took it as progress that he didn't try to add a paragraph about optics. He circled back to love because love looks easier on paper when the columns get long. Do you love him? He asked again, eyes catching on the fridge where the volunteer calendar wears our son's drawings like armor. I didn't describe bedtime songs or the lunchbox notes he pretends not to like. I didn't pull out photographs where love is a lighting trick. I pointed to highlighted lines. I love him at 7:12 a.m. check-ins, I said softly. At 2:41 p.m. badge prints, at book fair tables and field trip buses, and the office counter where I learned what minutes are worth when you spend them where a child can find them later. He blinked, and for the first time in days, he looked like a parent standing in a school, not a man campaigning in a crowd. Before he left, I asked him to initial the pickup rotation. He did, hands slower now, each letter a small surrender to the idea that accountability is a kind of love. He paused at the door, tried one more shot at the old chemistry. We were good once, he said. We can be again, for him. We can be reliable, I answered. For him. He nodded like a student who finally understands the assignment isn't a speech. It's a form turned in on time. After the door clicked, the apartment was the sound of a pencil cooling. I sat with the quiet long enough to hear my heart resume ordinary work. Then the email pinged that doesn't bother dressing up for feelings because it belongs to the registrar, not a plot. Subject line, Volunteer Total YTD, Verification and Signature. I opened the PDF, and there it was in the registrar's plain font. Parent volunteer hours year to date 136. Below it, the breakdown by role, classroom support, lunch duty, field trips, book fair, each with dates and initials that made my throat warm in the way relief does after a storm has taken its hands off your roof. I printed 2 copies because paper that matters behaves better in pairs. I laid one beside the legal pad where the inventory column still glowed with the day's work and slid the other into the folder with the check-in bundle, the ledger, the counselor's memo. The registrar had left a line for my signature beneath a sentence that could have been a lullaby if lullabies were written by people who prefer clocks to crescendos. I acknowledge this summary as accurate to the records maintained by the school. I understand its use for grants and recognition. It was not applause. It was oxygen. I thought about the women in the office who shepherded all those minutes into meaning, about my son tying his shoes slower when he's worried, about how small hands reach for the nearest true thing when adults start throwing confetti where a calendar should be. I thought about the day in the car line when his little eyes dropped and my throat pinched, and I decided quietly that I would never let performance confiscate his safety again. I thought about what I want him to remember about me when he is a man who finds himself in rooms where stories get loud. Not that I fought well, that I filed well. The pen felt heavier than it should have when I picked it up, gravity of a different kind. I hovered over the line with my name waiting, first, middle, last, the way it appears on my badge, my lanyard, the little peel-off stickers my son slaps on my coat like medals. The apartment light tilted toward evening and found the paper without needing to dramatize it. Somewhere a neighbor's washing machine thumped like a heart deciding to go on. Pen over my name, I realize what I'll build next won't fit inside a narrative, only a record. He lied about my presence. I increased it, for other parents too. His little eyes dropped, and something pinched my throat. Not rage, just a mother's ache. Heartbeat quickened, fingers tightening on the folder. No lies in front of my child. That ache became architecture. I stopped treating my check-ins like a private defense and turned them into a public language anyone could read. 1 year later, Thursday evenings belonged to the clinic in the library corner behind the paper cutter, where the attendance officer rolls out a cart with the yellow badge printer and I unfold a trifold board that says in block letters, "How to read your check-ins." It isn't glossy. It doesn't promise miracles. It shows a simple chain, left to right, badge scan, timestamp, destination room, staff initials, exit time. We keep bowls of pencils and a stack of request forms like blank permission slips for your own life. Parents come in work boots, scrubs, and courthouse shoes. We don't ask why they need the proof. We teach them how to ask for it. We printed a plain language guide with fonts the grandparents don't have to squint at. The first page explains FERPA in English. What is a student record? What is a visitor log? Who can request what? Without turning a school office into a courtroom. The second page decodes the badge sticker, every field annotated, down to the little box labeled Purpose. The third shows how volunteer minutes convert into grant match dollars because showing up funds more than feelings. It funds art and recess aids and a bus that doesn't leak. We translated it into Spanish, Arabic, and the two languages that show up every year because the world arrives in fresh alphabets. The PTA treasurer keeps a running tally of clinic nights, total parents trained, total forms processed, dollars unlocked for programs. When grants ask for community engagement, we hand them highlights in 3 colors and a picture of the printer cable. At home, life unclenched into a routine that can hold a childhood. The desk I dragged into the window actually faces daylight now, not a wall of reminders stuck like barnacles to my brain. Mornings are cereal and sneakers and a lanyard hook by the door, where my badge sits like a small faithful tool instead of a talisman. Some afternoons, my son beats me to the office door and looks up first, not at his shoes. He knows where I'll be if a story starts to bend near the fax machine. 3 paces back from the counter, hands open, voice low, trust placed in the machine that prints names without adjectives. He learned to read the sticker. He peels it off my coat and names the fields like a spell. Visitor mother. Purpose, classroom support. Time, 2:41. We made a game of spotting the line on the weekly attendance summary where the highlight lands. It's not proof for him. It's context, the way calendars make sense of weeks, and road signs make sense of roads. When he asked if I forgave his dad, I told him forgiveness is a word we use when we need sleep. What we used here was process. He nodded like a person who has watched staff do their jobs and decided grown-ups don't need to be saints as long as they're steady. The office changed too, because people inside institutions can get braver when someone hands them a sentence that works. The principal added a line to staff training. If an allegation happens in a hallway, move it to the counter. The attendance officer laminated a script that begins, "Let's look at the record together," and ends with, "Would you like a copy for your files?" We put a small sign over the badge printer that says, in a font I can't quit, "Numbers don't tremble. People do." It makes people smile in that quick, grateful way that says their fear has somewhere to sit while their brain catches up. I see old versions of me at the clinic. Women who have been performing calm for so long they forgot they were allowed to ask for paper. Men who want to be useful and are embarrassed to admit they don't know where their kid stands at dismissal. Grandparents who carried the whole school year in a purse and just need one line that won't smudge. We teach them to write their names. First, middle, last, to bring ID, to define the date range cleanly, to ask for volunteer ledger and visitor log like they're ordering at a counter that respects their time. We warn them off hallway debates. We tell them an office aide's patience is not a buffet. We say, fix the record, not your tone, and watch shoulders drop as if someone finally turned down the thermostat in a crowded room. Some nights I stay late to help the attendance officer reconcile the volunteer ledger against the month's grant match submission. We highlight book fair, STEM lab, lunch duty, field trips, the quiet miracles that keep a school from fraying. My hours are in there, but they're just hours now, no longer a defense brief, just part of the fabric. When we sign the monthly, the officer turns the clipboard so my hand can reach without leaning. We both initial. It's not intimate exactly, it's dignified, there's a difference. The co-parent schedule is a calendar, not a negotiating table. We keep it in the platform where it belongs, weekdays nested like reliable rails. We do not make the school a stage. He shows up when the square is his, and when he doesn't. The system records that too, without malice. When he asks for photos, I send pictures of permission slips and the weekly newsletter. We tell our son the plan the night before. It sticks. He sleeps. Full circle came on a Tuesday, which is the best day for truth because nobody dresses for it. Same office, different moment. The bell had rung, the printer hummed, and a new parent stood at the counter with that half apology people wear when they've decided to ask for what they already earned. Can I get my check-ins? She asked, voice neat, eyes tired. 1 year ago, I would have stepped in with the speech and made myself a bridge. Now I step back until my heels found the scuff line on the linoleum where parents stand when they mean business and let the officer read. Of course, she said, slipping on her glasses. Date range? The parent said, since August, in a tone that knew its own months. The officer printed. The highlighter cap clicked. The yellow came down the page in bright, steady bars, and I watched relief arrive like a coat over someone's shoulders in a too-cold room. When the pages slid across the counter, the parent didn't cry. She didn't perform gratitude. She nodded, squared the stack, and asked for a second copy for the grant, like a person who understood her presence could fund a librarian's extra hour. I loved her for that exact sentence. I loved the office aide for the way she smoothed the corners without petting the moment. I loved the printer for singing the song that saved me. If you're watching this because someone made you smaller in a public place and you started to doubt your own footsteps, hear me. When reduced, fix the record, not your tone. Your voice can be sweet or sharp or shaking. The badge still prints. Ask for your check-ins. Learn the hallways where your name lives. Put your ID on the counter like a hand on a door you have every right to open. Then let the institution do what it was built to do. Remember you accurately. I gathered the leftover request forms at cleanup and tucked them into the folder we keep near the printer. The one labeled if this story hit home, and numbers don't tremble, people do, rang true. Please like the video and share it with a parent who needs it. Comment below. How does your school handle visitor logs and volunteer hours, and what would you change? Subscribe for more real procedural reveal stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss an episode. Save this to watch later, and drop your favorite line with a timestamp in the comments to help others jump in. Parents, not misbehavior. The library clock ticked in that benevolent way clocks have when the day did what it promised. The attendance officer capped the highlighter and slid the pen into its sleeve. Families zipped backpacks. The building exhaled. A woman hesitated at the threshold, a familiar tilt to her shoulders, the posture of someone who already knows the dates, the mornings, the minutes, and only needs the paper that agrees. I didn't give her a pep talk. I didn't rehearse the argument she might face in a parking lot. I walked to the counter where the light is better and held out a rectangle that has changed more afternoons than any speech ever will. I slide a blank request form to a mother who already knows exactly when she was there. If this story hit home, and numbers don't tremble, people do, rang true, please like the video and share it with a parent who needs it. Comment below, How does your school handle visitor logs and volunteer hours, and what would you change? Subscribe for more real procedural reveal stories and turn on the bell so you never miss an episode. Save this to watch later and drop your favorite line with a timestamp in the comments to help others jump in.